the institute I direct, Tricontinental Institute for Social Research, we were very struck um, last year when Dr. Tedros, the head of the World Health Organization, he's a very eminent Ethiopian scientist. Dr. Tedros used a phrase which really shocked me. He talked of vaccine apartheid. He used the word apartheid. Now, for people who don't know, the word apartheid comes from South Africa, which means the separation of races, to keep the races apart. When he used the phrase vaccine apartheid, what he referred to was that the countries of the global north were vaccinating at a pretty good pace, even though there's a very strange anti-vaccine culture that's developed. Um, if you leave that aside, the possibility of vaccinating everybody in the global north is there, at least to reach the 70% threshold. In the global south, some countries, at the pace at which they're going, won't be vaccinated to 70% until 2100. So 2100. It's going to take till 2100 to use the current vaccine at the current rate to get to 70% in many countries, not just one or two countries. So Dr. Tedros said there's vaccine apartheid. We looked at it closely. We said, look, that's not adequate, this phrase. There's medical apartheid. You see, because it's not only that the vaccines are not being provided, but as a consequence of 45 years of International Monetary Fund pressure, many countries were forced to basically break down their public health systems. In 1978, in Alma Ata, in the Soviet Union, there was a WHO meeting which produced the Alma Ata Declaration, which urged countries to build strong public health systems, early warning systems, public health workers who can go door to door to ensure, that there's no malnutrition, to ensure that children are vaccinated and so on. In normal times, in a pandemic, public health workers are essential. So because of this cutback on medical care, there's medical apartheid. Then there's food apartheid. 2.7 billion people. We look at the numbers, 2.7 billion people. That's 1 in every 3 people in the planet don't eat properly. You see, you're in China. China has just eradicated absolute poverty. You see, because China has eradicated absolute poverty, if you take China out of the global statistics, you're coming to almost 1 in 2 people on the planet doesn't know whether they'll eat, this evening, tomorrow, and so on. So there's food apartheid. Look, we know there's more than 3 to 4 times the amount of food on the planet. It's not that there's no food. It's not a Malthusian thing, there's too many people, too little food. But people don't have money to buy food. And that's what we call food apartheid. Then there's money apartheid. If you look at it carefully, you'll find when a poor country goes to the banks to borrow money, the money is more expensive than it is for a rich country. That makes no sense. Why should a rich country pay less? Well, it makes sense to the banks. From the standpoint of the banks, a poor country is more risky than a rich country because they may default on the loan. Therefore, you charge them more as a premium against risk. But if you charge them more as a premium against risk, you're basically guaranteeing that they will default on their loan. That means money is more expensive for poorer countries than for richer countries. This also applies to individuals. When a rich individual goes to a bank, the money is cheaper for them than it is for a poor individual. That's the risk premium. This is crazy. It makes sense from the standpoint of the bank, makes no sense from the standpoint of trying to advance equality. There's money apartheid. Then there's education apartheid. We had a lockdown. Children in China must have studied for some period of time at home. To study from home means every child has to have a gadget, has to have a computer or a smartphone. Every child, not one per house. If you have 2 children, 3 children, each child will need their own gadget. They'll need their own quiet place in the house. That means you need multiple rooms in an apartment. That means they'll need internet. They'll need electricity. Millions, hundreds of millions of children don't have access to electricity. Forget internet, forget gadget, forget a quiet place in the house. So this is education apartheid. So we said there are four compelling apartheids in the world: medical, money, food, and education apartheid. And unless you seriously take these things to heart, to grasp, can't deal with other things. It's a good thing that we're not going to blow each other up by nuclear bombs. But what's the point of being alive if you can't eat, if you can't study, if you can't take care of your health, if you can't, advance yourself culturally with some money that you borrow? What's the point of being alive? It's a violation of the UN Charter. It's a violation of human rights that we live in a world of these apartheids. Human rights. They need to go and read the UN Charter from 1945. I keep a copy of the UN Charter always with me. I read it regularly. It's an incredible text. This text is the most consensus document on the planet. 193 member states of the United Nations have signed this binding treaty. It's not a non-binding treaty. It's not a set of values. You've said we will accept the charter. If you read the charter, then you read the UN Declaration of Human Rights. If you read the WHO Constitution from 1946, all these countries have pledged through the WHO Constitution of 1946, through the UN Charter of 1945, to some extent through the Declaration of Human Rights 1948, through the Declaration of the Economic and Social Council in the year 2000, quite recently, all these countries, including the United States, have pledged that health is a human right. If health is a human right, how do you accept the fact that perhaps before the next year and a bit is over 1 million people would have died as a consequence of COVID-19 in the US? How do you accept what? Isn't that a human rights violation? If you go back and you look at the WHO Constitution of 1946, it talks about the provision of healthcare as a basic human right. Now, if your healthcare is all private, if you can't find tests in your own country, you can't even get an antigen test, if you don't have a mask mandate, when the WHO says, look, you need to wear masks to prevent against this, that, and the other, if you can't do any of you are violating the human rights of your own population. And yet you're talking about democracy promotion. Now remember, this is a habit of the United States. They'll come up with a reason to put pressure on a country, Iran, nuclear weapons. Well, it's very clear that Iran is not developing a nuclear weapon. Iran is developing a nuclear energy project. Whatever your views are on nuclear energy, they are not developing a nuclear weapon. Okay, they've made it clear. They signed an agreement in 2015, the Joint Comprehensive Agreement on not advancing the the uranium, whatever that's called, not purification, but I'm not a very good scientist, but that thing. They've agreed to do all of that. Suddenly you change the goalposts and you say, no, it's about, democracy or human rights violations. The West uses this as currency. They use it as currency. They bring it out every once in a while. The West is never going to say human rights violation in Saudi Arabia or human rights violation in the West itself, the healthcare issue and so on. They never talk about all that. It's always somebody outside who they feel threatened by. They'll say, oh, your problem is first trade, you're cheating at trade. That's not working, then democracy promotion. I mean, we should not allow the West to use concepts like democracy and cheapen the concept, because this concept is important for us. You see, the term democracy is important for us. Human rights is important for us. What is the human right of people to eat? The human right of people to have medical care? What about these rights? I mean, it's coming at the same year that the government in China has eradicated absolute poverty. That's a human rights victory. But again, it's not seen like that. And I would like to say that we also are at fault here because we haven't properly talked about the things we are doing. You see, if in a country like India, if the Indian government significantly, or in the state of Kerala in India, better than in general, in the state of Kerala, if poverty is alleviated, why don't we talk about it in the language of human rights? Why don't we talk about it in the language of democracy? Why don't we take the language away from them? We allow them to hold these terms, democracy, human rights. This is a big failing of countries in the global south. The global south surrenders too much ideologically to the West. And I put the blame on us. We are not aggressive enough. And I think we should be more aggressive. And I don't mean aggressive in a negative way. I mean, we should be more forthright, more bold. We should be much clearer.